So yeah.
Okay.
Then also that no chick the doctor Itachima Teni the tomato Yosamario. Anytime so three should get
So this is the end of 1 year's classes basically done. We've got 2 classes including this class left. And yeah, we'll finish up the year.
And then Katsam Peningazo Janel Lanton Society Nitiji left Genjoko Gomni the Shepari. Genjoko Gomni Chester Chatatella, 2 some goes of Tangus, Genjoni Penny Lo Yongu Bas or Jean Taman, Sons and Nazi the Tamato. Get Gomzeat and Jogomzeat, Nika Gogores, Nani to some Gossam Gogores, and it can Joseat and Santa Kigomchi, Santa Jogomchi at the kitchen word, and Giambati, Jean the Sonar Mombos on the Rus in Italy.
So we're going to start here in the book. It's in chapter 25, and it's under the heading The Importance of Analytical Meditation. I don't have the exact page number first because I'm looking at a PDF, but it's the section that says, there are many scriptures that explain how to engage in analytical and stabilizing meditation, how all 3, learning, reflection, and meditation, are essential, and how the mind needs to be trained by alternating analytical and stabilizing meditation. And so this really is just, as many texts say, is really just emphasizing that we need both the single-pointed concentration meditation and we need the analytical meditation. And we have to sort of go back and forth between them.
To some go some the Nemaya Chishi started that also Shun the Yonde the Akaris at the kitchen. Too bad the kitchen body, look on she at the kitchen body, Yoni she Gonatani, near the tattoos in a near the kitchen body is. Can check what the miss and near the kitchen bodies. Yentani, so with it on that, but the sheet for the matter, she needs
So we talked more extensively in previous classes about learning, reflecting, and meditating. This sort of 3 steps of training the mind. And so just to sort of reiterate that, right? So learning, which also is actually literally translated as hearing in the Tibetan Tupa. You can think of as hearing, listening, reading, any kind of taking in instruction. And then once you've done that, of course, it's really important then to actually, you can't leave it at that, it's important to actually consider, to think about what you've learned, to understand it.
Mupachila tembo chening gozuna njogom chakayore ni tonda mambola kipachinite sabozo atele kikom chakayore komji temba dordina jita chango ngoto jela soyore tanda anda sembana japang to gombilam se gom se ya tonda chila komji
So when we talk about meditation, of course there's the essence of meditation is again and again familiarizing yourself or cultivating an understanding or familiarity with something. That is what the essence of meditation. And we talk about there being 2 types of meditation. There's the single-pointed or placement meditation and the analytical meditation. And to summarize very, very briefly, the single-pointed or placement meditation is this idea that you take an object of meditation and you repeatedly familiarize yourself with it over and over and over and over and over again until you're able to stay on it very stably. Analytical meditation is where you're really thinking about the qualities of an object. You're really sort of analyzing and considering different aspects of an object of meditation.
Last Tani, Janet and Hampons, they are the Karasin and Jogum Chin, Jogum Kuchamdra, and Mupatia Pushu Chapsara, Jenny Jane Jacaremato, Tombo on the Janela. Tampons, they had the Athena object, Tombo Colina, Tokyo Chase, Tampons, they had Janet to Janil Noni, Jenny Jacare.
So we use the terms analytical meditation and sort of concentration or single-pointed meditation. There's hot water, I think. Is there hot water left? I think there's still some hot water in the back if you want some.
Oh, yeah.
So we use the term single-pointed meditation and which is concentration, maybe colloquially, and analytical meditation. And so it's important to understand that there is a difference between these terms and what we would call calm abiding, shamatha, or special insight, or vipassana, sometimes in the Sanskrit. The difference really is that, so you can think of calm abiding as the sort of long-term goal of doing concentration meditation. So it's really what you achieve after doing a lot of single-pointed concentration meditation. It's a state of attainment of a really refined concentration meditation. And special insight is not like our normal analysis is not special insight, right? Special insight requires that you have achieved calm abiding, and on top of that, then you're able to do this really refined kind of powerful analysis.
Well, the need of which is on that, you go down, Geshe Lharampa Rangrig you not choose it, you Martin, you Jungunal, you go down, Gumze at the shoe, Lavachim, which it carries it. The Gumdi Theatre, Gumze, not so sound in Yawatango, and Yawatango, not so milling Gumdi Tessa. Sarni samlo to basic chemboy. The dorsal telegergonary lower gergon sonsa, you shall have a country of what in your top of country shows it. So
when we talk about meditation, of course, this in the Tibetan, this is familiar because the word for meditation in Tibetan really is the word just to familiarize. It's like to develop a habit, essentially. So this idea in the Tibetan is quite clear. The reason that we need to meditate, right, is that for countless, if you believe in past lives, and for countless lives, but even in this life for many, many years, probably not countless years for all of us, but for many years, we have accustomed ourselves to these habits that are creating problems in our mind, right? And so to change those, because you've created a very strong familiarization, a very strong habit for those things that you want to change, you have to habituate, you have to familiarize your mind with a different thing, a different habit, and this is not easy. This is hard to do.
So that you are tango sagalanga the candidate yapochigo to your gomre. You are tanga nutrition menand nutrition chuta non the Kachi that it catch or get on the sound on the company gomre.
So in this idea of, right, like we want to change the way our mind works to something more healthy, right? So the quality of mind that's able to analyze like what is the problem and what do we need to cultivate, and to think about the kind of positive qualities and the features and all of the things that we need to do, that we can say is analytical meditation, is analysis. And then once you've sort of figured out what you need to change and how you want to change it, then sort of repeatedly doing that over and over again is the single pointed or placement meditation.
Tatanima dodigan the gomrum tamazianda gomrum tombo zianda wata. That it come on which John shall go to tombo gomrum tamat so long. Kashi John shall that don't have in integration. Carresiti Matsor Gonjo Gonica, Geshe Lharampa Kechiwares, Perna, Marmechil, Yena, Marmechuch, Tandanato, the same the Marme in Womenjo, Chunchuch, any help out Papa giving you the riches, that the word Chimboyazo, which Yagonda, Tontongo Gorilla, Chapa Magivich, and Jogom Gores, and Patent Generation or Tonda Perish.
So in the text that we're using, there's a lot of quotes from sutras and from commentaries from the stages of meditation and these great sutras. But if I wanted to summarize like sort of the idea that what they're talking about in terms of the different qualities of concentration meditation and analysis or analytical meditation, is you can use the example of a candle or a butter lamp. And so the idea is that if a butter lamp, if the flame is small and it's windy, the flame is going to just sort of get bounced around over there and not have a lot of power. So the lack of wind or calming the wind is like your concentration meditation, so your flame will stay steady. To make the flame bigger is like the special insight or the analysis meditation. That is what makes the flame stronger.
Also, Tani, Jalak Gomjaptanda water. Architavare, a consumption on the Nima, Jigdom Jigabsha, Jigdom the Jachin in Atoya, Gonima, Nemano, Jigdom Jigawia, Jigdoms in a total.
So this is we're sort of at the end of the text in the this the section on special insight and calm abiding, or the sort of analytical meditation and the placement or concentration meditation. But right now, what I'd like to do is just to go back and sort of summarize everything that we've covered in this section about these two things. So what we're talking about here is that we're going to go back and start with the six. It's sort of considered the 6 accumulations in Tibetan, but it's the 6 things we need to start meditating. Dictionary real quick. So when we talk about, in the sort of, these are sort of the 6 preparations you have to have before you start doing concentration meditation. So there's sort of 6 requirements or things you want before you begin to meditate. And so the first of these preparations or these sort of requirements is a place that is suitable. And so what makes a place suitable? One of the important things is the ability to get food, right? If you spend all your day trying to get food, or it's really hard to get food, or it's expensive, that's not great for your practice. The next thing is you also want to make sure that in this location there's not a lot of thieves or bandits or bad people that are going to try to hurt you, or animals that might try to hurt you. And you also want to be in a place that's good for your constitution, for your health, right? You don't want it to be too cold or too hot, or whatever condition that might be hard for you physically, right? It's not going to be helpful. And so then to finish off the attributes of the place that you want to try to find before you start your really working. This is before you really start working to achieve Shine. So you want good food or easy accessible food. You want there not to be thieves or bandits or people that are going to hurt you. You want there to be sort of a healthy location that's good for your body. You also want to not have lots of distracting friends that are going to show up and sort of want you to go for a walk or engage in non-helpful activities and things like that, right? So you want to have good friends for this purpose. And you don't want a lot of noise, both from people or even from like a loud river or something right nearby that's going to kind of disturb your mind. Yeah. And so then the next, so we finished with the place. Now the next thing is to have few desires and to be content. And these are basically the same. There's a slight distinction, but really it's just that you don't don't want to be always thinking, oh, I need this, I want this, I want that, right? Giving into these thoughts of sort of craving other things or being unsatisfied with what you have, because that will disturb your. You also need to to set yourself up so that you don't have a lot of activities or duties during this time, right? If you're always going to town and doing things, or if you're always having things you have to do, then that's going to disturb your meditation practice, your concentration.
Last number of positive the digital children, Ramada, Gomjavi Casa, so Digikaraj on the teaching Konja, the Kalas, so Nima digital approach, and he has present the digital approach.
So the next one is to have good ethical discipline. And so generally this means like, you're holding your vows, you're not doing negative things, but in the context of the retreat or the context of developing practice, this also really means like, before you start your retreat, you set up a schedule, like when you're going to sit, when you're going to meditate, when you're going to wake, when you're going to go to sleep, right? So you have the discipline to follow through with that every day when you're doing your practice. So we also have to give up. This is very similar to having contentment or lack of desires, but it's we have to give up. I would say indulging in these sort of compulsive conceptual thoughts driven by craving or desire or other afflictions, right? So we can't always be thinking, oh, let's go do that, or dreaming about what you're going to do when the retreat's over, or right. If you start engaging in all of these conceptual thoughts, then that's just going to become a distraction. So this is sort of generally the preconditions, and of course, when we think about it, like one of the most important things is having a peaceful, calm, quiet place, or really having a peaceful place to practice and to start your meditation is really important.
Nipat carreziti, Tagomia is put it on the carceri, or it doesn't put it on our young as in the kitchen, the reason that you put the Thomas on the doom, the Ridoche, go to Sharama, Munit, Nastar, the Dijani, kitchen chenitini, Thomas on Yapshop, the Teti, and Tombo, and I am for your reason, getting with the only Kalimok, Tombo, Magic, Kalikaro.
And so then we think about what do we want to do with our body when we're meditating, right? So you ideally you can get in one of the Vajra postures, or just crossing your legs, and it's it's good to have your eyes partially closed and your eyes sort of pointing down towards your nose. You want your back straight. You want your hands in your lap in this kind of position. And you don't want to like force this. Of course, in the beginning when you start meditating, it might be hard to hold this kind of position, but it should at some point. You don't want to be like really making yourself do it, but it will be a little difficult in the beginning.
Voilà, so Fatri Deatan, Nipertanji Comjanity, whereas in a theory, Yan Samarita, Jatoni Nambag non Yonta session row. Manchester Comjati, Detan road, in the rays in Montachopatis on the captation row, non Yaton go young Detan Ramanda.
So we say this is sort of the position you should take, but this is sort of the most famous way that people talk about it. But there's of course many different ways to meditate, many different positions, right? There are other ways to sit and meditate, and that's certainly true.
Ani the Gombian also talk about on the same that's why I think they want to march on Tomatel. Loro Gachuzia, the Chicom shows, Loro Gachuzia, the Caticom, is it? Also, Tambotel, Nagonica, Maru, the Chief, Lotani, Corundrojini, Rovi, Yam, the Samlo Cartans, and so was the Ponali of the Latanda water, that's also the Panda water, that's also Mantropa, with say Tomat, Ma, Doagan, Cinema, Roson Sam, Matan, the Telitan, and the Yatan, and on the Loro Gutsura, Tombo Marchi Towndi, Yuan Tama Mandros or Sambachi, Young only, Yuan Tamatino, KSM, and Lowoton, so let's control and that so some ya yo somebody marching ya chi ta chi ya marching ya chi ta ni that ni and is some chase.
And so when you first sit down to meditate, you might find that your mind is sort of disturbed or just busy or hectic or whatever. There's hot water if you would like hot water back there. So you can do this practice that's called 9-round breathing. And the first thing that you do is that when you're sitting there and you're breathing through your nose, and what you're doing is you're imagining getting a martin. I think it's
on this also no more to some that never last also the mantra from my dog and the mandos on some young up the and then Zewa the solar of work and the machine is one on some.
And so when you sit there and you're meditating and you're breathing through your nose, what you want to do is imagine that you're breathing in like sort of virtue, good qualities, everything that's positive and good, and you breathe that in. And then when you breathe out, you want to breathe out all of your sort of afflictions, your negative thoughts, illnesses, any kind of obstacles, things like that. And so you sit there and you do 3 of those, in, out, in, out, in, out.
Well, then you're something. Na condition ni mat condition ni yang over something. Condition ni yang condition ni jebolo. Something that some great song. So long
and so then you switch and you imagine that the so then you switch and you imagine that you breathe in through your right nostril and out through your left nostril, then in through your left nostril and out through your right nostril. So you do that 3 times, and then you switch and you breathe in through your left nostril and out through your right nostril 3 times. But you're imagining the same thing. So you do 3 with both nostrils, 3 in the right, out the left, and then 3 in the left, out the right. But the whole time imagining, you're breathing in sort of virtue, good qualities, all of that, and you're breathing out all of your afflictions, negativities.
Okay, long dictande, morning, tombo nikinani, tango samba, and each jebo longo samba man, the Ketan Koro, long gigati nikanani, gixegre, chitochebo martaya, chicken on the euro or jet that you can't that the Nissan Mata. Koro and Dinoni magic, Dinoni Yante, yes, same good in December morning. And
so really the important thing is to think about like that you're doing this. This is really, whatever you're doing, it might be that you're getting some breath in or out, one or the other. It's not so much important the physical blocking as it is really the awareness, that thinking about that you're going first both and then one side and then the other.
What did you good Jenny? That good is only done that same to learn of Matona Yanjo, good teaching in Lurdina, same the matter, just a good.
And so you can do this and you just check your mind. You do it once and you see if your mind is relaxed or has got is still sort of disturbed. And you just can keep doing it. You can do 9, 9, 9, 9, and you can just keep doing this 9 rounds over and over again until you feel like your mind has started to become a little more peaceful.
Same the Lolo which has on any go Mujitani Gawari and that the same Malolo Chitani, Gum Jakas, so Mupata, so was important and the Gabon will Sejan Yoriana, and Dumkatan, Domba Conjure, the Sailor, the Nindichilla, and Domba Consit in the Chicrinora, the Nindichik itself, so Gomia the Carina, Theatre Soundatan, Gomia the Jeton Gomba, so Soundatan, Gomia Sound, the Carina and Cure is over a matter, Yinchin Menchilla. Hagumbano, and the Yungores in a Gongoma, Donna, so Sapoya for Lol Shardia, and she didn't use some Bayana, so people will wood Diana, Dorjee, and Ramada. And it's your Mukbat, so good, Danka question, and you go Nina, Mukadil Sound.
So now after your mind has become a little bit peaceful, a little bit restful, then you're able to start your actual meditation session. And so there's many things you can meditate on here in terms of this kind of concentration meditation, and it doesn't really matter so much your specific object. We've talked in the past about meditating on there being like a very small bright white right here between your eyes, or even a small vajra, the dorje. Or you can imagine a small one of your sort of the Buddhas or Bodhisattvas or the Idams that we use, or whatever your object is, sort of that size, kind of out in front of your face, about an arm's length away. Any of those, you can meditate on any of that. Really, it doesn't matter so much. It's really just that after your mind has become a little bit pacified, then you start the meditation session, sort of trying to visualize the object of meditation.
What the mukba the so kind that the mukba dam chani sonte yantaba mukba tiran lichini gonda yampoyori. Karsa mukba jeb machore the la woma jena yan jutan report chena ning komshik the yabo yajin ro.
The main thing though is that once you've decided to work on your concentration and you pick an object, you have to stay with that object of meditation, right? It will not work out very well if you are sort of one day to the next, like changing objects. You want, because what we're talking about is habituation here. Remember the word in Tibetan is familiarization, right? So you want the same object over and over again. That's really the important aspect there.
What the mukba tembe chesazagani, tell the same that the layama chini big tell the hako ashigla. Kaptatili, whom the Yishiga Jawbore Mungawashi, Tawani Javlo Mari, Kashigumukati and Oda, I'm short telling in the under the Richeni, one shilla, one shakate mepazoto at the Tagorimata, one shilla Yanson at the now around it, Gumjuni Chapamari.
And so once you really settled on an object, it's really important to understand that the goal here really is we have the sort of physical sense powers, or the physical mental consciousness, the sense mental consciousnesses, or the sense consciousnesses and the mental consciousnesses. And so what you're trying to do in meditation is decrease the strength of your sense consciousnesses and really meditate on a mental consciousness, right? So there are people that meditate on sounds or external lights, right? But any kind of external sensory thing you're trying to meditate on will not work, because what you're really trying to do is meditate on your mental consciousness.
Does like visualizing a deity, is that like an object, or is that something else? Because that's also something they sometimes
the
deity
right? Time, but I'll ask one thing.
Nipa Yomar is over Gomla Chulkun some Yomar, says you could go down the road, Narokar Gomi, so that and the Gonton, the Semga, Seconds or Venatu Mushin Chalach, that is about Sajan, Mumatsumi Chala, the Samata, Mukaton, Saboto, or Tenji Yonich, John.
Yeah, of course, that's definitely possible. But in terms of developing concentration, this actually isn't specific to Buddhism or even religion, really. The concentration is just a skill. And so it's really any object. The important thing is that you're trying to develop a mental consciousness that's able to show you something in your mind that's as clear as your sense consciousness, right? So you have to really be developing that mental consciousness, but really whatever inspires you to really develop in terms of concentration, right? That whatever inspires you for that is fine.
Last of Tani Gomjani Mupal Tembo Shy on the Tani, 70 Tangans and girls, and Yaki Kandi Geshe.
And so now that you say we've already we've decided on our object, we've begun meditating, we've got some stability, we're beginning to develop some stability, right? So there's the 9, we have the image over there, there's the 9 stages they talk about in terms of attaining shamatha, which you can see also as the 9 sort of stages of progress in concentration.
Also, Tani, that's every Tombo Kavla of Nemanga Sosiana, Metal Jama Panage, but the same days of Maton of the Combatombo, Kavla, through.
So the first level, which you can say is like, I think it's called placement in English. The first level basically is this idea. There's an example of a flower and a bee, and the bee is just sort of dropping and coming off, and landing and coming off, right? So just touching it for a moment, coming right off, right? So that's the first level. And the biggest obstacle at this level is what we would call gross distraction.
That's all. Mata Teddy Kavla, that on go to the Kavla Carri City, Parchichi and Awatala, Tanda Jamshutas over on Parchit, Najan, Telanimbo things. That is Jibona, she's a pizza, Cariziti, Tomatella, Derindo, Niparnata Cariziti, Adama Chepagni Pachichi, and Marco, Lelunipa, Dama Chepinipa, Nimbo Martin Binipa. Jungle joints and you got them binipa. What is it? Oh, what is not reason? Oh,
And so when we start this process of meditation, there's 5 faults or 5 problems or obstacles that are going to arise up, and then you have to sort of apply the proper antidotes to progress. And the first fault we could say is laziness. The second fault is not recalling the instructions. The third fault is sinking and excitement. Earlier I said distraction is the problem at the beginning, but actually technically we should say excitement is the problem at the beginning. Distraction's not quite right. The third fault are laziness, not recalling the instructions. Is the second one. The third one is sinking and excitement. The fourth one is non-application of the antidotes, and then the fifth one is actually application of the antidotes. That's like over-application.
What did you say? Tamboni Dama Jenita Gomja Tandum Jechujana, Gomja on the Norway or Maritin.
So yeah, so if you understand these 5 faults and you understand this process, then you're able to you should be able to sort of meditate properly and go through this process in a way without too many mistakes.
Tombo to Dama Jepatamari, Tombo to Lelo, Lelo, Gomja Nimatrani, Trija, Sani, Nani, Papa, be sure that they my own Vichetala, Tombo to La Nimbo to La Geshe Lharampa Nimbo, Stonji Tembaga Chichi, tell that Stornanda was your Dobanda was Chichi, Tani, Tebayongo, and it is a partial ranging the Katache on the Deponda or Shinjan, the reason it is at any part that thing goes in. Xinjiang,
so the antidotes to laziness, there's 4 antidotes to laziness. So in this case, laziness we can think of almost as procrastination. It's this idea that you just don't do the practice, right? Or you don't apply yourself to the practice, right? So it's really important in the beginning to develop sort of trust or faith, or that the practice is beneficial, to develop some sort of desire to do the practice, some sort of motivation or devotion toward the practice, and then you develop from that you develop a sort of effort to do the practice, and then ultimately at the end you develop this pliancy, which of course is this really blissful kind of ease with which it is to do the practice. So that makes it really easy.
Atani Dama Jepatani Patri Takini, Dama Jepat Hakota Tanson, interesting the general going on the shade they go. I just watching Yenny. Jason Pandu, Takan go for Sunday Chesaro, Basic or something that the chamber on the job, what is the name of Chamba Tajari?
So the first fault is laziness. The second fault is forgetting the instructions. So for example, here we are in this class, and we're telling you a little bit, Geshe was telling you, I'm telling you a little bit about how to meditate, and you listen to a little bit of meditation, and then you go and you sit down, and if you've forgotten it all, you're like, okay, now what do I do? So there's no benefit, right? So you have to actually recall and understand and remember and apply remember these things.
So that the Tombo Gomjang nearly Choya Nirendo, Gomjani Mutro at the Gomja Messia.
So yeah, first it's important just to you don't know how to meditate and all this, right? So that you do sort of listen and understand and apply these lessons.
Anitaki Gomjabi on the Kavle Nibakar Legrezena, Chimata Gopani Legrezori, Chivata Carrezi, Chival Charani, Gopala Charani, Gopat Carrezi, Tombo Gopari, Mupatel Jean, the Jamato Pashur, the Lani Shundro, the Goparopa, Mala, the Pats, Gopachamori.
So the first faults really are sort of in the preparatory phase, like sort of when you're just beginning or just trying to begin to meditate. The next fault, the faults of sinking and excitement, this is really what your problems are when you're actually in the meditation process. And so both of these are divided into gross and subtle. There's gross and subtle sinking or dullness, and there's gross and subtle excitement. And so gross excitement, we can say gupa in Tibetan. Gross excitement is just losing the object. You put your mind on the object and your mind goes somewhere else, right? So you're just really losing the object. Subtle excitement, you're actually able to stay on the object, but you're still getting sort of subtly pulled away from it or distracted sort of.
Atani Masemni Galama Gamino Itaki, Tombo Mupa Semni Tombo Kavla Mupa Teni Papando, the Telesiani Tombo Kavla, Timpando at the Gopalo, Tikabla Chamba, the Shishan Secretary on Yojozo. Nanipa Leondi, there's the Gejimbo parts, there's the 21, Tinity over the Kinikabla. Parcecesur de care este în goba rapat. Nu va lua nici așa option de ori. Să iau deja ea. Dire.
And so the antidote to both sinking or dullness and excitement is mindfulness and introspection. And so in our example, in the first stage, which is this sort of placement, right, where the idea that the bug or the bee kind of touching the flower and then going away and then touching the flower, right? So it's the excitement that causes the bug to fly away, and it's the mindfulness that brings the bug back, or brings the bee back to the flower, right? So you've got this. So the difference between the first stage and the second stage really is just the amount of time the bee stays on the flower, right? So that in the beginning it's just instantaneous, and then over time you begin to be able to stay there a little bit longer and a little bit longer. So that's the first stage, and the chief obstacle there really is just this gross distraction, this gross excitement.
Tani samba leondi tani mukpali ya pote togo mukpala deni mashorti gomya kondo ya tego sasa kaptetila gopa rapata tani shira leomari yana ya tikab leondi tani chiwa rapata leom chiwa rapata karesiti gom de la mukpando ya ko shikami tego ani semnyo ngore nyoni ma mukpasa ko mere ni ma kuna ta peti Trotharita, no Marichima, Nyeranita, Nimakina, Yotono, the Pistani Nichia, Gumbia, Saposhuchi, so Manyo Tocha on your Parapala, the Chimura, Semnas, Chimara, Sopas, somebody on the daily.
So in the first two, the main problem is this gross excitement, right, where your mind is scattering. So when you get to the third level, then you don't so much lose the object of meditation anymore. You kind of don't have so much the problem with just totally losing the object. And at that point, the main problem that arrives is what we call gross dullness or sinking. And gross dullness or sinking is this idea that you're holding onto the object, but you know, at the grossest form, you fall asleep, right? But even it's just a matter of your mind sort of withdrawing too much or becoming bored or tired or dull, right? So that the object doesn't appear and your mind isn't right, did he?
So that, so Gombia Devi Casella, what the Yapo shooting the order Diana, the same check country I mean, not the Chiliana. Just go out there on a sound of the coin, you get the rich and I think good.
So, of course, when this dullness happens, you have to really make an effort to enliven your mind, right? To bring us back. It's really important when if you're sitting there meditating and you're nodding asleep, or your mind, you're just letting your mind wander all over the place, right? Whatever it wants to do. That's not meditation.
No, so what they reach on the Tassim is somebody on a Gumia Pondo Jab the Wari, Tatsu, Chimarabi on the Mashon Rory. Tachiarapango shed the same the Seri shoot on the Tabarishini Chimaraba and Matlevachi, and he's a Nishabar, Girimboy on the Toala, Masim the not to know Machawa, Chapaorita, Kapiki Carrios, Mupat Saboyo, the shoes Yamatomi, the tongue at Tamshore they can go. Theatre Hulu, which Mupata Sabwich March of Kitilla, Chimachamo, the Wally, this hymn, Bishop Cablet,
So when we get to the fourth level, so you've now gone past the gross excitement and this really gross form of dullness, and so now you're able to stay on the object pretty well, and the object seems to be fairly clear, but there's what we would call subtle dullness, which is harder to spot. And it's sort of your mind and the object being not as brilliant or vibrant as they could be.
So that then the park gom yaondi, and then Mupasa boya pocha, Mukitamia pochi, gomia pocha ondi. The chiman gopara pazea, the legredo, Mupat Sapo shoot Yavala, Nipachi, don't Nipachi show up and chop out all the Chantoana. Mupashoro Marita, you Chaton on the end. So Mupat Japati and that, you all the channel, they go by Chamo, the living, go by Chamo shoot, living, couple of sending Nabaja.
So the main obstacle in the fourth was this subtle dullness that's appearing. What happens in the fifth level is that you're starting to really have a stable mind and a clear appearance of the object. But the fault of subtle excitement becomes a problem. And this is described as sort of, if you're looking at ice, like if you've ever looked at a frozen river or something and you've seen the water moving, it's sort of described as water moving behind the ice, right? So there's just this movement behind your object that's still sort of a bit of excitement.
Also, tani semni tambo wani pa kabla su go para pa yawa ka semni samba kabsa chiwa ra pa yawa semni jipa kabsa chiwa chamo ngabi kabsa go ba chamo to so no ba shi chimbo yon ri kapte semni nga de la zazo shi chi pa chamba da shi jen katina zazo chi go ya pore ni so zazo chi go kabes.
So just to review, so for the first two levels, the problem is this gross excitement where your mind is constantly scattering away. The third one is the gross dullness. So the third one is the gross dullness. The fourth one is the subtle sinking, and the fifth one is the subtle excitement.
Tani ngapa da chipale on dini chikom ta sote chiwa rampa da yo marta chiwa chamo da go pa chamo tis yong gorita chupa tambani kabla ni shatani ngo shik chiwa te ma go ikabta chupa tambani kal te jano.
And so it's important through all of this, right, that you're properly applying mindfulness and introspection, right, so that you're recognizing these faults and applying the antidotes when they arrive. When you get to the sixth level, of course, the gross excitement and gross dullness have been totally conquered, and you're starting to really get a handle on the subtle excitement and the subtle dullness, right? The subtle sinking. They're going to rise a little bit, but not as much. They're really starting to become less of a problem.
Masonta atso kabla tachi nibanga nanga changom chongi sia nyembo tengo bi kabre ti kabla nyembo mate na ni pares zaza mache na ni pares.
The kind of thing too, but
ta tombo ni domba partal chango te yongo yora sonta nyimbo ngomba de chepi kabres.
So from the first one to the sixth one, of course, it's really important that you are applying the antidote. So we have the antidote, the fault of non-application, and so it's really important that you're actually applying the proper antidotes up till that point.
Tani parishini changom zea tsawa nyini yoya me achani ni te tsambatsun rawo te chena kati ko gyana gyaptoya pat so shu sa wo tamchile wo te chiwa ta go pa chingo ma na chango la na o te ni se mi gyapal ti tonji te chena jan chikango geba leo di chango tsawa nyini chingo me achasa ti ka tonji te tingo de ma.
So by the time you reach the eighth level, then really the excitement and the dullness has been totally conquered. Even the subtle excitement, the subtle dullness is totally gone, and so you have this really good, strong meditation. And so, really, the important thing at this point is that you practice, that you keep going, that you just practice effort and diligence.
What is the antidote to dullness? Like,
chiwa nyembo the same zito pa de jakando ma semya taman rawo che emanga so tiji share pa yaman tapsona ya go chi ne asamu pala sa po chinga son anyen ro khu chi che dia sambo ro che ta chi pa che ke ne ma pala joka son da karse chiwa shi chembo lemna tani peti shalon da lo pa ka ta tsolin ro ni ke ja ni ya se on kom ja de chi shi chembo chong ne ti che de ngo ina ya ta tani Sen Japan Valley to Chologico, that the Rion Samatia, Antonio Kudochi, the same as a chair. What teaching?
Ultimately, it's just a matter of sort of awakening your mind, right? So you can just sort of like sit up and open your eyes and just kind of enliven your mind a little bit. If it's really bad, I mean, in the early stages, in the early first, second, maybe third levels, if you're like falling asleep or something, then you get up and you go outside and you go for a walk, something like that to kind of get your mind going. By the fourth, fifth levels, right, you really shouldn't have to get up and go outside. You just have to sort of enliven your mind, open your eyes maybe a little or something.
As it to pass it in national you could watch it as other church you are. That is that there is not something that you could watch on South China, the dance for the and the same thing. You think of as it is, you go
It's like it's a bit like if you're in class and you catch yourself falling asleep, right? You want to just sort of like wake yourself up and sort of like, oh, I got to pay attention, right? You know, really. So it's sort of like that, right? That you're just sort of really sort of waking your mind up and refixing on the objects.
Last but then that's only Gabale on the Tandasani Japa Kalutism. Then is Gum Hachaya Pachani and Batson check Conchema when the Jango Mayoni, Tinicati Gumjani, Yamachi Gumjam, and Yamani Gumjam Toya Tenichia Yores, the Kabul, Semi Gabare. Yeah, but that's a thing.
So when we look at the 8th and the 9th, right, the difference between the 8th and the 9th really is that in the 8th you're still having to put a little bit of effort, still having to sort of really kind of work at it just a little bit. When you reach the 9th stage, then you really no longer need effort to practice or to meditate or to concentrate. You're able to stay seated and meditate and keep your object, you know, clear and focused for really as long as you want.
Also, then go back again, the Kavla, then Tanda Jani to your residinato Maratini, Gomja de Casella, then he Parashicom Commandi, then he Ranjinga similar, Senshi on the other top, then he Lisha on the other top, lead on same time alpha, Devano, that you wish you Caneta Kayorita, Catsi, dinner, yourselves on road chicken, the same with your Chambuchi Layoris, at least if she can the Davis and the Gileon Jenny Jani to Paddle.
So once you reach the 9th stage, you haven't reached the shine or this calm abiding, this attainment yet. So you're able to sit there and meditate for as long as you want. And so you do this over and over again. You continue working on your concentration, on your meditation. And then at some point what will happen is you'll develop this pliancy of body and mind, which is this suddenly you just incredible, it's like this bliss, this joy, and that you're really able to just sit there and without any difficulties or problems, and you just feel great. And so you once this bliss, and it's both a mental and a physical pliancy, sort of a bliss that arises. So when that arises, when both of those arise, then you've attained what we would call calm abiding, this attainment of calm abiding or shine in Tibet.
Well, that's in the Leoding, so Yamashana, not so same the charms in and in Melachani Mabushika, don't Calimando, and is what
we made the example previously in another class, this meditation. It's like taking this piece of metal and putting it in a fire, right? And so when you've attained calm abiding and you have this incredibly powerful mind and the pliancy of body and mind, then it's like, oh, you've taken this piece of metal and you put it in the fire, and now it's totally workable, and you can take it out and cut it up and do whatever you want with it, put it into whatever shape you want.
So that you talk about Gumja Tini Jardina, Chipian Marita, so seven Chamba, Yasota Shando Chata controllers of a carni, the Jilly Chodia Cosmosa. Then it held on there at the Gombo, the Jali, no, his own, the Jitrikan, you gave me. But she found on ya to be on than the Lisa Chicken with the young Josh and
But if you just stay in this attainment of concentration, this calm abiding, it doesn't actually do you that much good, right? So what you have to do on top of that is then use this mind and be able to meditate on the afflictions like love and compassion, bodhicitta, emptiness, all of these things. And so what you do is you use this mind, this really powerful concentration mind, and then through that mind, you develop what we call special insight, which is the ability to combine the mind that's incredibly concentrated with the mind that's able to analyze without disturbing the concentration. And then so with those two minds, then you have this incredibly powerful mind that you're able to really change your mind very effectively.
What is the Taki Joanna Jitanda, 70 Tangens a good Janija Leomai? You know, that's what someone joke on. 70 Tangens a good and joke on. You know, Jani Mari. 70 Tangens of the joke and joke of them. You know, 70 Tangens Jani Tachi, but Tamala Jogum Shako, Jani, Tamatum Jani, and Jogum Jabatin Chitaguri. Jane tan jogom bu chapar. Gukatan jogom re deo jane chayo.
So if we look at the 9 stages and then calm abiding, right? So the 9 stages are not calm abiding. Calm abiding would be like what you attain after the 9 stages. It's sort of the fruit or the result of the 9 stages. But we can say that the 9, so we can't call the 9 stages calm abiding, but we can say that they are all placement or concentration meditation. So again, really, the goal of meditation is to change one's mind, right? Is to really change the way that we think, or to have a healthy mind. And so really the most important way that we do that is through meditation on things like love, compassion, patience, all of these good qualities, right? This is really the main way that we're able to transform our mind. So I think that's we're gonna stop there today and to open up the questions. So in the next class we'll go over the 4 placements of mindfulness, which is sort of the end of this chapter, and then that will be this year will be done. Yeah, please, if anyone has any questions, please offer a question.
So is this like meditation where we visualize the object? Is this only something that we should be doing in like a retreat, like you mentioned, or is it like a daily thing?
I mean, of course, ideally we would all go into retreat, but of course that's not possible for most of us for lots of reasons. So yeah, of course it's very beneficial just to do this in your life if you can find a relatively quiet place and sit and just do a little bit every day, and you will definitely improve your mind's ability to focus and stay concentrated. Other questions?
I heard that they are like shamatha retreat for like 9 weeks, and most people should be able to obtain like the shamatha stay after like 9 weeks retreat. Is that true?
Yeah, I don't think it would be definite. Of course, there are people that go into retreat and are able to attain quickly, but there are also people that go into retreat in 2 or 3 years and have not attained shamatha. So it's definitely not a definite that you should just be able to go. It's so difficult to say that you should be able to do it in 9 weeks is not. So it's really important in doing this practice to actually attain calm abiding that you're able to actually follow these instructions and apply the antidotes at the right places, right? So that you can make mistakes and cause yourself problems in terms of, so that's the biggest one that people make is this subtle dullness, like not recognizing the subtle dullness and then meditating on that, and that totally blocks their ability to progress further.
lobbyong rawa chama chi gom ja ton rawa chi ta koro tsutsun rawa chi ni gom ja desa lo ni sum de on de parshi chemba chuni me kire cha lo sam lam san chi gom de chi ya pore ro ma chi tni kalin chi so de chi ma konsa chol tni kalin chi so kan de ta koro chi ya cham gom de ri ti no on de shol so da chi gore de
I mean, you have to be really careful because if you're meditating on dullness, you actually can make yourself stupid. You actually can hurt your brain or your mind. There's an example of a meditator who's meditating above the TCB school. There's the meditation huts up there, and he meditated for several years. And he hadn't studied or then he just sort of went and decided to meditate. And he came down after a few years, and he was like forgetting things and having a hard time thinking. And the Dalai Lama said, "Well, yeah, you've been meditating on dullness for 3 years, right?"
Sans attaquer chez un agent dans des diates qui se content de tatashina kashi yokotomi
So yeah, and generally if you do it properly, right, if you understand the instructions and you do it properly, so people are able to do it quite quickly, but not everyone.
So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, my question is like, so in other schools, they're like when you start meditating, they recommend you start like meditating on your breath or something. So like in this text, is it suggesting, say you're just beginning meditating, but they recommend doing this visualization instead of the following the breath? And like, how do you decide what object to visualize?
The connection between the temporal like that's what the consolati the Korean the German Jerry the temporal go to the Kari actually you're the kind of dumper kind of structure.
I think so stroa kan la yona te yakiro so kan gamun rawo chi yona rawa and then it's go na ki poyo sari sa so I chi chembo yona gom to gro achi shita chi ta re on de mare sa sam rawo chi la chi ya te na te skali so kan chi go na ya kan do sa sam rawo so to na te ni concentrate on da mu pa so dang ka ya ya.
I mean, it's really difficult to say. The holiness said really it's your choice. What's helpful is if you have something that you are that you're sort of attracted to, or that you enjoy, or that creates a sense of sort of aspiration or joy inside you, right? That you want to meditate on. If you don't want to meditate on it, you're not going to meditate, right? So something that you're sort of excited about picking is good. But it's really, in terms of placement meditation, it's just up to you.
Oh, so it could be anything, sort of, is what I'm saying. Like it could be your breath, or it could be a visualization.
Yeah.
And the visual could be anything. It could even just be like these lights.
For the purposes of concentration, yeah, it really doesn't matter. As long as of course, it has to be a mental consciousness. You said that earlier. You have to remember you're not meditating on an external thing. But even just this, like this bright point of light, which is something we talked about in previous classes, because it's very easy for us to visualize. We're not very good at visualizing. So even just a bright point of light, it doesn't. Really, it can, for the purpose of concentration, it can kind of be.
Ani yang not so near mala 6% of money. So same tani de na. So same the teaching same. So tani. Demu pamalan de na. Ni gom jam same.
There's also people that meditate on mind. It's also possible to actually take the mind as your object of meditation. And that's another one.
Concept of recommendation. Yeah, the physical
I just said that sometimes it's actually hard to find the mind as an object. But it's only as I said that this is a very good way to meditate as well, is to meditate on mind itself.
Any number jamais going to reach not
in terms of tantra, of course, it's all really meditating on idams or deities. These place up. That's really tantra meditation.
not the breath, right? In these tantric.
No, the
운종 요래. 운종 전에다 우탄양서 고마운 거네.
So there are meditations on the breath in tantra as well. They're sort of different contexts. Yeah.
same que ça me dit changeant le lot
So there's a meditation where you think about breath meditations as well.
quand j'entends de on dit pomme chetni na so di ninki na tam da na tout son samba chetni a chetni pas tant je on tenité comme tant je.
So you can think about om as it when it's coming in, then om, and then when it's reaching your here. So the Tibetans say this is the mind, right? So when it reaches your mind here at the heart, and then when you exhale it, you hum coming out.
Same que tu dis comme elle tam que cabine doit
Of course, this is all done in your mind. It's not you're not speaking these things. You're visually imagining.
What you go on to mandan that you know chu with the banjo and chu come on the tam you go na ya
There's lots of ways to meditate. If you have sort of faith or trust or belief in Buddhism, then this kind of meditation on these yidams or the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, right? These can be very beneficial.
That's the appreciate. Yeah. Yeah.
And last week, Geshe talked about the stabilizing meditation and analytic meditation. So for a beginner, like usually you stabilize, use which one, or you can practice both ways.
We do one or the other, or both,
Yeah,
or
both.
okay. So the Tangoya, the Jogong, Jegong, that's what Tango Kaichigiri, that's what the baby much in the
What that Sabono Shigasha Marazana. That's so Nijin Rawachi Gombaina, Tombo Jigum Chigore Mato, Tombo Poni Nichi, Sound Rawachi Apolero Chigum. And then you move back to the Chicken, Tombo Jigum Chigachigo, better Shan Jogum Chesson. Niji Gombatayana, Zopa Combatatolis, Tombo Mombo Chisalo Mato.
Niji
Gombat Jigum, Tombo Semchan Semcha Gadingo, Mombo, Samlo Tani, Teniso, so Jella Parishi, Niji Leo, Niji Leota, Samlo Tingualishan, and Job.
So, of course, if you're meditating with this visualization, right, this is just placement or concentration meditation. But if we're meditating, right, with something like patience or love or compassion, then you start by thinking about contemplating, say, love or compassion, right, for sentient beings. And that is analytical meditation. You're analyzing, you're thinking about it, and then when some feeling for it arises, or some sort of like as you settle on something, right, then that's the placement meditation, the concentration meditation. At that point, you stop and you just try to stay with that feeling, right, and then so you can sort of go back and forth that way.
So it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or not.
No, you just
it depends on the context.
Caballo.
The
Inchumachik, the Sayanachik by Army by Captor Javakarch.
Yeah. It's not a matter of if you're a beginner or not. It's really a matter of the tool you're trying to use. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Right? They accomplish different things. So, the placement meditation and the analytical meditation have different uses.
For example, you just mentioned like you are meditation. You use analytic meditation to think about or contemplate about compassion, right? And then you have the feeling of that compassion. And then and then next, how do you
stay with it?
Yeah, stay with it.
So ninjegum, jigum
Jagum.
the ninja samatang, the sort of jungle. Take up to the jokum kanjis. The idea basically is to try to hold that feeling that arises as long as you can.
Some the concept of songs and that so band all kind of money
Yeah, so it's just a matter of like that sort of decision or that feeling that arises of compassion. You just want to stay with that as long as possible. Keep it there as long as So normally, if compassion arises, like we sort of arises, then we just forget about it. It quickly goes away. But in this case, what you're trying to do is to try to hold on to it, try to allow it to stay as long as you can.
And then your mind, you need to continue to visualize, like.
So you're not visualizing, right?
Yeah, no. Now is analytic meditation. Now you said stay on that feeling, that compassion feeling.
But you're not visualizing the compassion.
Yeah,
you're just holding the feeling.
Right. And then what's in your mind that time?
They do things. They So the object of meditation, of course, would be sentient beings, right? All sentient beings, whatever sentient being you're meditating on, right? So that's the mind, the object of the mind, and it's in the feeling that's arising is this compassion. Does that help? So you're just trying to hold that as much as possible, but you're like I don't think so. You're looking at it. You're not necessarily visualizing. With your object of your mind is these sentient beings, from which you've developed compassion, and then this compassion arises, and then you stay with that. So this is different than the concentration meditation where you're trying to make the object stay as clear as possible. This is not the goal here, right? Your mind is the object of your mind is these sentient beings, but you're not trying to make the sentient beings appear clearly, right? What you're trying to do is, it's like you're trying to improve this sort of natural essence of compassion that you have inside yourself. So you're trying to really increase your internal compassion. So that's really the goal, not visualizing sentient beings. This is in contrast to meditating on emptiness. When you're meditating on emptiness, you really are trying to make the object of emptiness as clear as possible. It's a subtle object, but you're trying to have it appear to you very clearly. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is trying to really increase our internal compassion, like our ability to generate compassion and increase our compassion, make it stronger, more powerful. All right, yeah, is that good? It's ready. Okay, I guess we'll stop here. We've gone a little bit over, so. Thank you guys. Stop now. I'm getting cold.
That's a lawyer.